Should the state decide who is a Muslim? Today I want to react to a discussion by Qaisar Ahmed Raja, but rather than debating whether the Ahmadiyya movement is theologically correct, I want to ask a different question. Should the state be deciding theological disputes at all? This is one of those issues where theology, law, and human rights intersect. I think keeping those three categories separate is essential. Let me begin by making a concession that some viewers might not expect. If I were evaluating the issue from the perspective of conservative Sunni Islam alone, I understand why many Muslims conclude that Ahmadis fall outside Orthodox Islam. The doctrine of the finality of Muhammad's prophethood is central to mainstream Islam, and Ahmadis accept Mirza Ghulam Ahmad as a prophetic figure in a way Orthodox Muslims reject. Religious communities have every right to define their own theology. Churches do it. Synagogues do it. Mosques do it. I have no objection to Muslims saying we do not regard Ahmadis as Orthodox Muslims. My disagreement begins when the state turns that theological disagreement into criminal law. Here are two concrete facts. First, Pakistan requires declarations concerning the finality of prophethood and the status of Mirza Ghulam Ahmad in official processes connected with identifying oneself as a Muslim for certain government purposes, including passport-related declarations. Second, under Pakistan's Ordinance XX of 1984, Ahmadis can face criminal penalties for presenting themselves as Muslims in ways the law prohibits. Those restrictions include using Islamic terminology such as calling their places of worship masjids, using the adhan publicly in prohibited ways, displaying the kalima in certain contexts, or otherwise representing themselves as Muslim in ways forbidden by law. Whether you agree with Ahmadi theology or not, these are legal restrictions backed by the power of the state. This raises the real philosophical question: what is the purpose of a government? I think the purpose of government is to protect the civil rights of peaceful citizens. It is not to settle theological disputes. Theology should be settled through argument, evidence, persuasion, scholarship, and free discussion, not through criminal penalties. Imagine the situation were reversed. Suppose Sunni Muslims became a minority in another country. Imagine that country's majority religion declaring Sunnis to be heretics and passed laws saying Sunnis could not call themselves Muslims, could not call their mosques, and had to sign official declarations renouncing their beliefs before receiving government documents. Would Muslims accept that as justice? I don't think most would. They would rightly argue that religious identity should not be policed by the state. Notice that my argument does not depend on Ahmadi theology being true. Ahmadis may be right. They may be wrong. That is precisely the point. The government is not competent to decide theological truth. Governments change. Majorities change. Religious interpretations change. If the state decides theology today, tomorrow a different government may enforce a different theology. The healthiest society, in my view, is one where religious communities remain free to argue passionately about doctrine, while the law protects everyone equally. Let Sunni Muslims argue that Ahmadis are not Muslims. Let Ahmadis argue that they are. Let both sides publish books, hold debates, and criticize one another peacefully. But do not make theology a matter for criminal law. So my takeaway from Raja's discussion is this: the Ahmadi issue is bigger than one sect. It forces us to ask what kind of state we want to live in. I want a state that protects people's civil rights, not one that decides which religious identity citizens are legally permitted to claim. Not one that decides which religious identity citizens are legally permitted to claim. Truth has nothing to fear from open discussion. If a belief is true, let it prevail through evidence and persuasion, not through the force of law.